She served her country with honor, only to have guns pointed at her in her own driveway. Why? They didn't even give her a chance to open her mouth. Not a hello, not a can I help you? Just shouting, guns out. Commands barked like she wasn't even human. It all happened so fast, but also slow enough for her to remember every second of it. The sound of the tires crunching over her own driveway, the screech of walkie-talkies, the way the officers' hands gripped their weapons, not out of caution, but out of something colder. Danielle Rucker wasn't a stranger to intensity. She'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan, ran tactical units under fire, and trained with some of the best K9 handlers in the country. But nothing ever prepared her for the kind of fear that comes not from being in a war zone, but from being a black woman in your own front yard. It was a late Sunday afternoon in Modesto, California. Sun just starting to drop behind the trees, long drive back from Sacramento. Danielle had been helping her cousin move into a new apartment. She was tired, dressed in leggings, combat boots, and a faded Fort Bragg hoodie. Her 2 partners, Rex and Nova, both Belgian Malinois, rested silently in their crates in the back of her SUV. Trained, calm, alert, just like she'd taught them. She pulled into her driveway, the garage door remote clipped to her sun visor. Her modest 2-bedroom ranch sat on a quiet street lined with trimmed hedges and retirees who waved at passing cars. It wasn't fancy, but she'd bought it herself after leaving the army. It was hers. She tapped the button. The garage began to rise. That's when she noticed something. A woman standing on the sidewalk across the street, watching, holding her phone. Her lips were moving. Danielle squinted. She didn't recognize the woman. Slim build, early 50s, maybe. Blonde bob, athletic wear, holding a yoga mat in one arm like she'd just come from a class. Danielle didn't think much of it at first. New neighbor, maybe. She gave a polite nod and went back to backing her SUV into the driveway. Then, less than 3 minutes later, she heard sirens. 4 of them. What happened next would feel like something out of a bad episode on cable. Police cruisers swung into her cul-de-sac like a tactical op. One cut off her driveway before she could even turn the car off. Another blocked the street behind her. Doors flung open. "Step out of the vehicle!" one of the officers screamed. Danielle blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" she said, rolling her window halfway down. "Hands where we can see them, now!" She looked to her left, then her right. Was someone behind her? But no, guns were pointed at her car. One officer, tall, white male, late 30s, shaved head, crept toward her with his gun drawn. Another crouched near a neighbor's bush, also armed. "Ma'am, we got a call about a break-in. You matched the description." Danielle kept her hands on the steering wheel. Her heart was steady, but her voice carried steel. "This is my house. License and registration." "My house is right there," she said calmly. "I'm a veteran. My name's on the deed." They weren't listening. They never really do, not at first. From the back of the SUV, Rex gave a low bark. Nova didn't move. Her training kept her still, unless commanded. Danielle leaned slightly to the left, and with practiced precision, tapped her knuckle twice against the center console. A silent command. The locks clicked open, and that's when everything changed. But the officers still hadn't seen what was about to walk out of that car. The back door of the SUV opened slowly. The officers tightened their grips. What they expected to see, maybe someone else hiding, maybe a threat, wasn't what came out. First, a black nose poked out. Then a sleek, muscular Belgian Malinois stepped down onto the driveway with sharp precision. Rex. His coat glinted in the light, black and tan, his movements smooth, trained. His eyes swept across the scene like he was calculating everything. Nova followed, lighter in color but just as controlled. No barking, no growling, just quiet, steady presence. Each dog wore a tan tactical vest clearly marked. U.S. military canine, do not pet. Rex moved to Danielle's side without being called. Nova flanked her opposite. They didn't look scared. They looked like they were waiting for a mission. For a moment, no one spoke. Just the sound of radio static and shallow breathing. Danielle finally stepped out, slow and deliberate. Her posture was relaxed, but her presence, unshakable. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. "My name is Danielle Rucker," she said. "I live here. I just got back from Sacramento. These are my dogs. Military working dogs. I served 12 years active duty, 6 in K-9 Special Ops. The officers didn't move. She reached into her pocket slowly, deliberately slow, and pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open to show her veteran ID and her California driver's license. One officer, shorter Latino guy, mid-40s, badge red Perez, stepped forward and took it. He looked at the ID, then at her, then at the dogs. "These are military dogs?" he asked, voice cracking slightly. "Yes," she replied, "trained by me. They don't bite unless I tell them to." Rex took one small step closer, calm as ever. "You called this in?" Perez turned to the woman across the street. The blonde neighbor still stood there, arms crossed, phone clutched in one hand like a trophy. "Yes, I didn't know who she was. She looked suspicious. Big black truck, dogs in the back. I thought..." "You thought I was breaking into my own house?" Danielle asked, looking straight at her. The woman shrugged. "I didn't recognize you." "You've lived here how long?" Danielle asked. The woman hesitated. "A few months." "I've lived here 5 years. I mowed that lawn every Saturday morning for 5 years. You never thought to wave?" The woman blinked. "I just thought..." Danielle looked back at Perez. "Am I under arrest?" He looked uncomfortable, shifted his weight, glanced at the other officers who were now lowering their weapons, sheepish. "No, ma'am. There's obviously been a mistake." Danielle didn't say anything right away, just looked at her dogs. Rex sat down beside her. Nova laid down, her head on her paws. She knelt between them, gave each a gentle pat. The other officers started to back away slowly, one of them muttering something into his radio. Perez handed back her ID. "You understand, ma'am, we had to respond." "You had to respond," she said. "But you didn't have to roll up with your guns out like I was robbing a bank." He didn't respond to that. "You could have asked questions. You could have looked at the mailbox. Rucker, right there. Or maybe just, I don't know, said hello like a human being." Danielle's voice didn't rise, but it cut like a blade, calm, clear, undeniable. Perez looked embarrassed now. The other officers had already started retreating to their cruisers. Danielle stayed still, dogs beside her watching. Across the street, the neighbor had started to quietly walk away. No apology, just retreat. Danielle exhaled, not relief, just release, like a pressure valve letting go. But what she didn't know yet was that one of the neighbors had filmed the whole thing. The video wasn't shaky or distorted. It was crystal clear, shot from a porch across the street by an older man named Franklin Yates, who always said little but saw everything. Franklin didn't come out much. His knees were shot from decades in construction, and his wife had passed the year before. But he sat on that porch every afternoon, a bottle of root beer in hand, the other hand never far from his phone. He didn't expect to catch anything dramatic that day, but as soon as the police started yelling, he hit record. He'd seen Danielle come and go for years. She shoveled his driveway during that freak freeze 2 winters ago, never asked for a dime. So when they boxed her in like she was a suspect in a manhunt, he hit the red button. In the video, you can hear the police shouting. You can see Danielle's calm movements. You can hear the slight click as her dogs stepped out. And you can feel the shift in the air when the officers saw those vests. The video wasn't edited. No music, no slow motion, just raw footage. 74 seconds long. And someone, maybe Franklin's grandkid, maybe a neighbor, uploaded it that night. It took less than 24 hours to hit 500,000 views. Danielle didn't even know about the video yet. She was inside, sitting on her couch with Rex curled up at her feet and Nova beside the door, always alert. She still hadn't eaten. Her keys were still in her coat pocket. She hadn't even taken her boots off. Her phone buzzed. Text from her cousin. "Girl, is that you in this video?" Danielle frowned, clicked the link. She watched it once, then again, then a third time, but slower this time. It was strange. Seeing yourself from the outside like that, her posture, the way Rex stayed glued to her leg. The moment Nova gently stepped forward, placing herself between Danielle and the officer. She didn't cry. She didn't get angry. She just sat there, staring. It wasn't until the 5th watch that she noticed the look on the blonde neighbor's face in the corner of the video. Not fear, not even concern, just blank. Like she wasn't watching a person, just an object. She leaned back on the couch, closed her eyes. It's not that this was the first time she'd been profiled. It wasn't. But this one cut deeper, because it happened in the place where she was supposed to be safe. Her home, her driveway, surrounded by the very flags she served under. She thought about calling her cousin back, thought about explaining everything. But what was there to explain? Rex let out a soft sigh and nudged her leg. She looked down at him, then reached for her boots. She needed air. But outside, just half a block away, the story was already spreading. Franklin was getting calls from people he hadn't heard from in years. Some saying he was brave, some asking if he'd set it up, a few others, anonymous numbers, telling him to mind his own business. And the neighbor, the blonde one, her name turned out to be Kimberlyn Faulkner. She worked part-time at a wellness spa and posted inspirational quotes every morning. Her phone started blowing up too. Comments under the video weren't kind. Typical. She thought she was a hero. This is why people don't trust the cops. She really called the police because a black woman had a truck and 2 dogs? Others were worse, harsher, no filters. Someone even found her Facebook page and started posting screenshots. By Tuesday morning, there were news vans parked 2 streets away. Danielle opened her door and spotted them. "Lord," she whispered. Perez, the officer from the incident, had already submitted a report, and now his department was scrambling. They didn't expect the dogs, they didn't expect the video, and they definitely didn't expect the backlash. Internal Affairs opened a review. The police chief released a statement about procedural missteps and commitment to community safety. But no one came to Danielle directly. Not yet. But the silence from the department spoke louder than any public apology ever could. By Wednesday, Danielle's driveway had turned into a sort of checkpoint. Reporters in khakis and polos kept lingering near the curb. Every time she opened her front door, at least one mic got shoved her way. "Danielle, do you believe this was racially motivated? Were your dogs trained to protect you in situations like this? Do you plan to file a complaint against the officers involved?" She didn't answer. Not yet. She just walked Rex and Nova, kept to herself, and tried to act like things were normal, even though nothing was. That afternoon, the Modesto Tribune ran a headline that hit harder than she expected. Veteran homeowner confronted by police in her own driveway. Military canines may have prevented tragedy. It was true, and it was terrifying. She kept playing it over in her mind. The way the officers stood there, guns drawn, sweating, fingers hovering way too close to the trigger. How Rex and Nova had stood their ground like soldiers, unshaken, unmoved, calm. Most people didn't understand what those dogs could do. She'd trained them to disarm armed suspects, detect explosives, track fugitives across 8 miles of desert terrain. They could leap over 6-foot walls and sink their jaws into flesh with 400 pounds of pressure. But only if she said one word. One. But they didn't need it that day, because their presence alone said more than she ever could. After the video went viral, messages flooded her inbox, hundreds of them. From veterans, from dog handlers, from parents, from strangers she'd never met, but who saw themselves in her face, in her posture, in that stillness she carried when they shouted at her like she was a threat. And then one message stood out. It was from a former Marine named Tanya Levins, now a K-9 trainer in San Diego. She wrote, "Your control in that moment was incredible. Most people would have panicked. Those dogs didn't just protect you physically. They told the world exactly who you are. You didn't raise your voice, but they heard you anyway." Danielle read it 3 times. The truth was, she had been scared. Not shaking, not crying, but scared in that deep, buried way. The kind of fear you carry in silence because showing it means letting someone else win. Later that evening, someone finally did knock on her door. It wasn't the police. It was Kimberlyn Faulkner. She wore a blue button-up shirt, slacks, and nervousness like perfume. "I wanted to apologize," she said, before Danielle even said a word. "I didn't know who you were. I didn't mean for it to go that far." Danielle didn't invite her in. She stood in the doorway with Rex at her heel and Nova watching from inside. Silent, present. "You didn't know who I was?" Danielle asked. "But you still called 911 and said I was breaking into a house." Kimberlyn hesitated. "It looks suspicious." "What looks suspicious?" Danielle tilted her head. "The truck, the dogs, or me?" Kimberlyn fumbled. I, I just didn't recognize the car. I've had that car since I moved in. I don't look at cars. Exactly. A long pause. I'm sorry, Kimberlyn said again, quieter. Danielle nodded once. Not acceptance, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. I hope you tell your friends that, she said. I will. And I hope next time you pause before you reach for your phone like it's a weapon. Kimberlyn didn't answer, just nodded and walked away. Danielle closed the door behind her, and for the first time in days, she sat down at her dining table and let herself breathe. Not because it was over, but because she was ready. But across town, things were just getting started, because now the mayor wanted a meeting. The next morning, she met with the mayor, not because she asked to, because he had to. Mayor Douglas Rayburn, mid-50s, clean-shaven, always talking like he was one sentence away from a campaign ad, requested the meeting to listen and learn. He brought a PR assistant with a legal pad and a small recorder just in case. Danielle didn't bother dressing up. She wore what she always wore. Cargo pants, boots, the same faded hoodie. Rex and Nova stayed close, seated behind her as the mayor spoke. We deeply regret what happened to you, Miss Rucker, he began, hands folded on the table between them. It's unfortunate. What you experienced doesn't reflect the values of Modesto. She watched him closely, didn't nod, didn't smile. You say it doesn't reflect the values, she said, calm as ever. But it happened, right in front of my own garage. And if my dogs hadn't been there, I'm not sure I'd be here either. The assistant shifted awkwardly. The mayor cleared his throat. We're reviewing protocols. There'll be retraining. Officer Perez will be part of the internal review. And the neighbor, the one who called, she's issued a written apology. Danielle cut him off. She didn't apologize to me. She apologized to the internet. Another pause. The mayor looked uncomfortable now. I served this country for over a decade, she continued. Not so people could point a gun at me while I'm unlocking my own garage. He tried to interject. She didn't let him. You want to talk about training? Train your people to stop jumping at shadows every time they see someone who looks like me driving something bigger than a Honda Civic. Silence. Danielle leaned back in her chair. Rex's ears twitched, alert but relaxed. Nova let out a soft yawn. I don't need a medal, she added. I don't need a banner on Main Street. I need to know I can pull into my driveway without worrying someone's going to assume I'm a threat before they even know my name. Mayor Rayburn nodded slowly. You have every right to feel that way. I know, she said. I'm not asking for permission. He looked at his assistant. The recorder clicked off. The meeting ended without handshakes. Back home, Danielle found an envelope slid under her door. No return address. Just a note inside. Thank you for standing your ground. My daughter saw your video. She asked me if she would be safe if she grew up to look like you. I didn't have an answer, but now I do. It wasn't signed, but that note meant more to her than any press conference ever could. The neighborhood changed in small ways that week. A few people crossed the street just to say hello. A couple left flowers near her porch. A little boy on a scooter stopped and asked if he could say hi to the army dogs. She let him. Rex gave him a sniff. Nova just stared, unbothered, queen-like as always. But not everything shifted for the better. 2 officers from the incident were quietly moved to desk duty. The department didn't admit guilt, but they also didn't fight it. As for Kimberlyn Faulkner, she deleted her social media accounts and started parking 2 blocks away instead of using her driveway. No one really saw her out jogging anymore. Danielle didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. This wasn't a win, it was just what happened. And sometimes, that's the part that hurts most. Because for a moment, it felt like she was back in uniform again, having to prove herself to people who never even learned how to say her name right. But it wasn't over. Not until she told her story in her own words. The first email came from a local podcast host, then a journalist from the Sacramento Sentinel, then a producer from Good Morning Fresno, then a national outlet. They all wanted to hear from the woman with the dogs. Some wanted it live. Some wanted to fly her out. One even asked if the dogs could be part of the interview for visual impact. Danielle turned them all down, at first. But then her cousin called again, Zora, the same one she helped move a week earlier. Danny, she said, voice full of heat, you don't talk. Someone else will. And they'll mess it up. You need to say it yourself. Your words. Danielle was quiet for a moment. I'm not trying to go viral. You already did. Question is, what you want to do with it now. Zora wasn't wrong. Danielle didn't want the attention, but it wasn't going away. So she chose one outlet. Just one. A small, independent journalist named Tawny Wren, who lived in the valley and ran a web series called Front Porch Stories. No makeup teams, no flashy cuts. Just a folding chair, a mic, and a camera. They filmed in Danielle's front yard. No script, no plan. Tawny asked, "Can you tell me what happened that day?" Danielle nodded, took a deep breath, and she told it. Not just the moment they pulled up with guns drawn, but everything that came before it. She talked about the deployment in Kandahar, about losing 2 soldiers to a roadside bomb, about the nights spent teaching Rex to identify human scents in sandstorms, about Nova's first successful mission, about coming home and thinking she could finally breathe. I gave this country my time, my body, and parts of my peace, she said, and when I came back, all I wanted was a patch of grass and a place to walk my dogs without someone looking at me like I don't belong. Tawny didn't interrupt. Danielle went on. She talked about the silence that came after the yelling, the way the neighbor didn't flinch when she saw the guns, the way the officers only backed off when they recognized the vests, not her face. I had to be standing next to 2 military dogs for them to believe I was worth listening to. Think about that. That interview reached more people than the original video, because it was quiet, real, no yelling, no production, just one woman telling the truth on camera like she was talking to a friend across the table. The response was overwhelming. Letters, donations to veteran support groups in her name, messages from white neighbors admitting they'd made assumptions about people who looked like her, from police officers thanking her for not letting things escalate, when really it was them who had escalated in the first place. Danielle didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't even ask for change. She just asked people to pay attention. A week later, the Modesto Police Department officially added new protocol for handling civilian calls related to suspicious activity. Officers were now required to verify property ownership through dispatch before initiating a stop, especially in residential neighborhoods. They called it the Rucker Rule. She didn't smile when she heard about it, just gave a quiet, and went on with her day. At the dog park a few days later, a woman with a stroller waved and said, "Thank you for your service." Danielle nodded, but the moment that really hit her came at the grocery store. A teenager, maybe 17, walked up to her by the produce section, wore a hoodie, looked nervous. "You're the lady with the dogs, right?" Danielle nodded. He paused, looked around. "My mom said you were scary." Danielle raised an eyebrow. "Did she?" "Yeah, but I don't think you are." She chuckled, then leaned closer. "Tell your mom I'm scary when I haven't had coffee. That's it." The kid laughed. But while she found peace and humor, what she really wanted now was something harder to ask for: understanding. She didn't plan to speak at the town forum. It was scheduled by the city council as part of their so-called listening initiative. Held at John Muir Community Center, folding chairs in neat rows, microphones with short cords, and coffee that tasted like melted cardboard. Danielle sat in the back, hoodie pulled over her braids, Rex lying at her feet, Nova asleep under her chair. She wasn't going to say anything. She just came to make sure they didn't twist the story into something it wasn't. But after the third person stood up and used words like misunderstanding, communication breakdown, and mutual responsibility, something in her chest got tight. So she stood up. And when she walked to the mic, people turned. She didn't smile, didn't clear her throat. She just started. "My name's Danielle Rucker. I live on Rosewood Drive. I'm a veteran. I served this country because I believed in something bigger than myself." All eyes were on her. You could hear a cough 3 rows back. That's how quiet the room got. "Last week, I pulled into my own driveway after helping my cousin move. I hadn't even turned off the car before guns were pointed at my head." A few heads dropped. People keep asking how I stayed calm. I didn't stay calm because I wanted to. I stayed calm because people like me don't get the luxury of panic. If I'd yelled or moved too fast or reached for my phone, this conversation might be happening without me here. Someone up front whispered something. She didn't stop. I didn't curse. I didn't fight. I didn't resist. All I did was exist, and that was enough to make someone scared enough to call 911. She turned slightly, scanning the faces. That should bother you. A murmur moved through the room. I had 2 highly trained military K9s with me. You know what that says? It says I've been trusted to handle life and death situations in war zones, but apparently I still can't be trusted on my own street without someone assuming I'm a criminal. She paused, not for effect, just to breathe. You want to fix this? Then stop acting like this is about one bad call or one bad officer. This is about a system that gave one woman the confidence to call the cops on her neighbor because she didn't recognize her face, and gave those cops permission to draw weapons because they didn't take 2 seconds to ask a question. A few people clapped quietly. She looked toward the back of the room. I'm not angry. Not really. I'm just tired. Tired of being told I'm the exception when I'm just the latest. The clapping got louder now. Danielle stepped back from the mic, didn't wait for a round of applause, didn't linger. She just walked back to her seat, her dogs following without a sound. Later that night, the clip of her speech would get shared across platforms, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. That's all people wanted sometimes. Not answers, just honesty. But before anything could change, someone had to feel uncomfortable first. A week after the forum, Danielle sat alone on her porch. No cameras, no statements, no clicks or hashtags. Just a cool evening, her boots kicked up, a mug of tea in one hand, and Nova's head resting under the other. She finally felt still. Not because everything was fixed, but because she'd said her truth out loud, and no one had been able to silence it. She didn't want to be known as the woman with the dogs forever. She wasn't looking to be a face of a movement. She just wanted her peace back. And in a strange way, speaking up gave her a little piece of it. Sometimes that's all people want, to be heard without having to earn it with a badge, a title, or trauma. Rex stirred beside her, ears flicking as a car passed slowly down the street. Danielle glanced over and gave him a slight hand signal. He settled back down immediately. They were trained to act, but they were also trained to wait. A few days later, she got a message from an old friend she hadn't seen since basic training. He wrote, I saw what happened. My daughter asked me why someone would be scared of a soldier. I didn't know what to say. Thanks for helping me figure it out. She read it twice, smiled. That was the thing. Sometimes it takes one moment, a wrong assumption, a barking command, a silent dog, to hold up a mirror to the world. And not everyone likes what they see when it's held that close. Danielle never wanted to go viral. She didn't want to be in a headline or a trending tag. But if her story made one person pause before judging, if it made one officer ask instead of assume, if it made one teenager walk a little taller, maybe that was worth it. She looked out across her street. Same trimmed hedges, same old mailbox, same place she'd pulled into that Sunday. It hadn't changed, but she had, and maybe, slowly, that would be enough to shift everything around her too. Because the truth is, she didn't need permission to belong. She never did. She just needed the world to stop pretending like she was the problem in a place she'd earned 10 times over. If you've listened this far, remember this. Your story matters. Your face, your voice, your presence, they all matter. But sometimes the world doesn't recognize that until you force it to look. So if you ever find yourself in a moment where you're being silenced, overlooked, or misunderstood, stand firm, speak clear, and don't ever let fear decide the ending. And when the world finally pauses to listen, make sure they hear you.